The failure to act with sufficient ambition to avert the climate catastrophe will be the greatest moral failure of our time.
Making changes takes courage, and if we don't change things, we won't have a future.
We need a president who respects science, who understands that the damage from climate change is already here.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Zero Carbon
East Hall.
Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista, Series 2, The Manifesto. I'm Ian Collins. Welcome to what is fast becoming known as That Podcast, the one where they talk about the green stuff. That's us. The man with the guiding hand here is, of course, Dale Vince. Morning to you, Dale. And let's, why wouldn't we, start here.
The President of the United States has arrived in the UK ahead of a meeting with world leaders at the G7 summit this weekend.
For the first time since becoming president in January, Joe Biden steps out from Air Force One onto foreign soil. The soil of Suffolk and RAF Mildenhall, to be precise, on a perfect summer's evening.
The G7 summit, Dale. I thought you might be there, by the way.
And I would turn up in a diesel car, of course, but we're going to talk about that later. The big deal, of course, is Boris Johnson, you know, the man that talks so much about zero carbon targets, the man that flew in a helicopter to the West Midlands in the local elections to get photographed riding a bicycle, took a private jet to Cornwall from London to take part in a conference to talk about how we fight the climate crisis, amongst other things. Incredible.
You have to assume, in fact, no, we don't have to, we know there's at least, one person in the inner circle, the Johnson handlers, who is charged with exactly this point. I can remember at one conference where he was seen drinking a coffee out of a non-disposable cup, and one of the spads alongside just whipped it out of his hand and replaced it for a disposable cup. So there's people around that are there all about the optics. This won't be a very good look. And so at what point did somebody spectacularly miss the fact? I mean, he might as well have had a Calagas stove pinned to his arse as well, just to have kind of finished off the picture nicely.
Maybe he's missing Dom. Maybe, the brain has left the operation.
Yeah, it could be that. Yeah, he might have oddly spotted that and said that this is a rubbish look.
He might have done. You'd think he would. Because he spotted, that the curtains in number 11 flat were going to be a rubbish look, or the way it was going to be funded was possibly illegal.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's strange, the G7 summits. And obviously, we can get into the other stuff as well. I mean, why does Joe Biden need 100 cars to take him through the back streets of Cornwall, which are flown over in separate jets, big aircraft carriers, to kind of go on a couple mile journey?
Well, that's pretty mad. And that makes Johnson look rather reasonable, except, of course, he didn't have to travel across the Atlantic just from London. But yeah.
Well, indeed. Biden didn't have another way really to get here. So, yeah, okay, I get that. But all of those presidents, Macron and Merkel, they would have all had their own, security detail. I understand that. And that usually comes with quite a lot of armor-plated vehicles.
Yeah. But there's a gulf between what leaders do and what leaders say, I think.
To come in a gulf, that would have been better.
For the most part. I think Europe and now America with Biden at the helm, I think that's a different thing. I think here we've got leaders that really are putting into practice serious anti-climate crisis policies. We don't yet have that here in Britain, the country that just approved its first new coal mine in decades and a third runway at Heathrow and a 26 billion road building program and the largest gas-fired power station in Europe. That was the last 12 months of our government.
Is that what we've? Is that the largest gas-fired power station in Europe now?
Yeah, Drax. Yeah.
That's a
madness.
Do you know what? There's another point that I don't understand. I've never understood this about the G7s, the G8s, the G20s, whatever they happen to be. So here you've got the leaders of the kind of richest, most powerful, influential governments around the world. And they're going to discuss, top of the list, they've got climate change, they've got coronavirus, they've got the recalibrating of the kind of whole way we do business in life. If you said to a 10-year-old, these are the massive subjects on the table, how long would a meeting need to be to adequately address all of these things, all of the details around these things? You'd probably go, 2 years? 24 hours? Get in the bin. 24. How do they do this? What happens in those meetings? It's like this, at the very least, this is a meeting that you'd think, like a court case can go on. It can be a day, it can be months. This would be months.
So 24 hours of meeting time.
Well, I don't even think it's that. I think in probably total meeting time, I reckon it's probably about 8.
I mean, Hancock got 4 hours of grilling on his performance during the pandemic this week, didn't he? That was just one thing. One man, one issue.
There was more attention to Hancock than to global issues such as this. And I know that, meetings carry on. They go on before, they go on afterwards. That word again, the optics, are important that leaders gather. But even so, you'd think, a couple of days in Cornwall to sort out the world's problems. I'm not buying.
Yeah. Why not use Zoom? Well,
do you know what? You might as well use Zoom. I don't know what you would achieve differently by, meeting, and I'm sure it's a lovely hotel in St. Ives. It's a nice part of the world and all the rest of it. I don't know what extra you get out of things.
Photo ops.
You get the photo ops, and you Boris and Joe pally on the beach.
Yeah.
Here's a question from Ronnie on Twitter. He says he's going to give you a bit of a bollocking here. He says, Dale, how the hell can you attack Boris for his flight when you took a diesel car? He says a diesel car to fully charged. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's an electric car event. But Ronnie, I want to say, how the hell can you say that? How can you try to make any kind of connection between Prime Minister of our country flying to a conference from London to Cornwall in a private jet, and a rather big one, to talk about the climate crisis, and the fact that I've been in a diesel car before? I mean, oh my God, I'll be in a diesel car again sometime, because at the moment, there are more diesels on the road than there are electric vehicles, and it's just a thing, Well, I didn't have an electric car that would get all the way to fully charged, which I think was up in the Midlands somewhere. I'm not really sure. But as somebody theorized on social media yesterday, maybe I didn't have access to a Tesla. That's correct. Don't want one of them. We'll never buy one of them.
Well, and not given one from the boss there either, are you? So.
No. So I got to ride in a diesel car. I mean, big deal. But this is whataboutery, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? This is not dealing with the issue right in front of us, which is Boris Johnson, the man who talks endlessly about 10 pointless green plans and zero carbon targets, jumps in a private jet to go to Cornwall. Come on.
When actually there is literally up the road is a train that goes direct to where he wanted to be.
Yeah, exactly. He's got to set an example, hasn't he?
He hasn't got to queue up at the train station. And all of his cars stopped the traffic to get him there, so it couldn't be it couldn't be an easier journey to a train station.
Yeah, I mean, Boris Johnson is a man that thinks the rules don't apply to him, and his own personal carbon footprint is not the issue here. Yeah. It's the example that he's setting or not setting for other people. To get to zero carbon, we've all got to change how we live, and it has to start at the top. It has to start at the top and the bottom and the middle, actually. It has to start everywhere. But, when you have your leader just saying, well, whatever, I'm important, I'm going to fly to Cornwall. It's like, well, come on.
There's going to be, I'm looking forward, actually, to the answers to that, because that's going to come up, isn't it, at the subsequent press conferences. It will come up every time they talk about climate issues and changing your way of life. He's going to be held to account, I hope, by journalists who bring that up. But you flew literally down the road in a private jet, you clown.
Yeah. I think he just shrugs stuff off, though, doesn't he? He feels he's untouchable. He's a bit like Trump in that respect, isn't he? I mean, Trump could do no wrong, even though he did a lot of wrong. In the eyes of his voters, it just didn't matter. He went from one crazy thing to another. Johnson's a little bit like that. He's a pale version of Trump.
It's a weird kind of psychology, isn't it, of the supporters of that? Because it's almost as if the more things like this they do, the more their people love them. And I think that's just twisted. You'd normally be in the psychiatrist's chair for that kind of thinking. And why would that be? Here's a guy that's breaking his own kind of spirit of, climate and green government. And yet you find that enamors you to him more than you did before. I mean, that's just upside down Alice in Wonderland thinking.
Yeah, but there is a group of people in our country and in other countries that do resist the changes that we have to make. They find it offensive that we're being asked to change how we live and stuff like that. Makes them angry, and they'll be happy to see somebody like Johnson thumbing his nose at that kind of stuff. In the same way that there are people that are against the Black Lives Matter movement or organization, and the England players taking a knee. I mean, what's going on with that? And the Tories stoke that up. You've got a Tory MP saying that that's like taking a Nazi salute. I mean, my God, what planet does he live on? and an element of the crowd booing the England players for taking the knee ahead of international games. I mean, there's a group of people in our country that feel like that.
Funny world, isn't it?
It is.
It is. Every now and then you just sit back and think, wow, is this real? Is this the rehearsal for the real world to come? In a few years' time, I'm going to just step up to the plate and say, right, everybody take your positions. Now we start for real.
This time, read the script.
Yeah, absolutely. What about this? Plastic items from takeaway food and drink dominate the litter in the world's oceans. According to the most comprehensive study to date, single-use bags, plastic bottles, food containers, food wrappers are the four most widespread items polluting the seas, making up almost half of human-made waste, according to the research. And you might think, maybe I'm just being over-optimistic, Dale, that every time one of these stories, we know that the oceans are not yet clean, you're waiting for that bit of good news, thinking we've talked about this endlessly for a long time now, for many years, and yet the story, sadly, is still as grim.
Yeah, and I think the other half of plastic in the oceans is made up of discarded fishing nets and fishing tackle, actually. But we really need to do something about fast food packaging. There really should be a law against it. In fact, being single-use plastic, it should be biodegradable. And then if it does find its way into the ocean, it won't be a problem. But obviously plastic persists in the environment for 1,000 years or something, which is why we've created this new era, in which our plastic waste is entering the fossil record. I think it's the Anthropocene. So some geologists have called the period that we're living in the Anthropocene because people are now having such an impact on the environment that it's entering the fossil record. And in the future generations of geologists, if there are any, are going to dig up plastic waste and say, oh yeah, that was that period, the plastic age.
Yeah, where people today, swap Roman coins and people be swapping carrier bags.
Burger King clamshells, or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
Or a McDonald's giveaway toy, although they may have stopped that. I'm not really
That's going to really confuse people, isn't it? Was it Spike Milligan, the comedian, said he wanted to be buried inside a washing machine just to confuse the life out of archaeologists in 1,000 years' time?
Brilliant.
It's a lovely thought, isn't it? We don't know why he's in there. Maybe it was some kind of ritual. I like it. This from Naomi. I heard you on the Outrage and Optimism podcast, Dale. Are you still considering politics? Do you think it would be for you?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that podcast, actually. And I guess the answer is I'm in the same place I was when I wrote the book last June. And since I've been, in every discussion since then, I got one foot in and one foot out. I think it might be the right thing to do. I think it's the place where I could have most impact next. I think it's the place we're lacking most. We've got the technology we need. Yeah. It's more economic to use it. We've got the need. People want it. Businesses are adopting it. Where we fall down is with politicians. And so I do think that might be the place where I could have most impact. But at the same time, I think, oh God, really?
Yeah, because I think at the moment, we do a lot of stuff with you on the radio, for example. And we're, I think going forward, we'll probably end up doing more and more of that. I would suggest that gives you a better place than if you become a member of parliament, then, I suppose you could become independent, but if you're part of a party, then there are certain just natural restraints on that time, if nothing else, that means you don't have that level of freedom. So I don't know what you'd gain by doing that.
Yeah, if I went into politics that way, then I would do it on my own terms anyway. So I wouldn't feel restricted by what other people do and how it normally works. But yeah, you're right. Being on the radio as a platform, working with the Daily Express has been the most incredible platform, actually, to reach an audience that really needs to hear this stuff. The Daily Express have embraced this green campaign thing. I think it's going to be a permanent thing for them, actually, in the way that Brexit was for about 20 years,
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think there's going to be, I think we'll find that with other areas of news as well, that will just naturally kind of morph into that area initially because they sense that it's probably what they should do, but then ultimately it will just become the normal conversation.
Yeah. And in the case of the Express, we speak every week about what's going to go in the paper next week. And they thought it was a good idea at the beginning, but the feedback they've had from their audience and from other people and from within the organization has been so strong that, they just keep doubling down on it. And that's a fabulous thing. We first felt something like that in the early 2000s when we built a windmill for Ford to power the diesel engine factory at Dagenham. And they did it kind of almost for PR reasons. They thought it would look good, but the feedback they got from their staff and from the public from that one windmill led them to build a second, or we built it for them, and then a third. And it became a thing for them. That they felt the popularity of it, and so they did more.
Yeah, you sometimes got to have those inside the tent, as it were, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. Got to help them along the path.
Yeah. Talking of paths or highways, the electric highways.
Nice link.
Your electric highways have gone.
Yes, you're prairie, and that was a great link.
It wasn't bad, was it? Yeah. I didn't even plan that. It just seemed to naturally spew from my mind at that particular point. I think I was just worried, actually. I was worried that you'd run out of money, you see. So I was going to have a whip round for you because you had to sell the electric highway. So it must be a shocking week for you in that respect.
It was a bit of a surprise, actually. I mean, GridServe had the option to buy the highway since they bought a chunk of it in March. And, we knew it was always something they might want to do. But it was a surprise when they did it. It's the right thing to do. The highway is 10 years old this year. We built it at a time when there were just about no cars on the road in Britain. We wanted to break the chicken and egg impasse whereby people wouldn't buy cars because there was nowhere to charge, and people weren't building chargers because there were no cars. So we just set out and put 3-pin plugs on the motorway network to get that moving. And 10 years later, car range has gone from 80 miles to 300. Charging has gone from 7 kilowatts to 350, which is incredible. You can stick 100 miles in your tank in 5 minutes. And all the major manufacturers have set dates by when they're going to drop the production of fossil cars. And in 10 years from now, it'll actually be illegal to buy one in Britain, and other countries of the world will follow. And so in 20 years, we'll see a complete transformation of cars in Britain from no electric cars to being the only thing you can buy. So we're in the middle part of that 20 years, and the electric highway needs big investment now to adopt the new high-powered charging 350 kilowatt standard and keep pace really with the growth of cars hitting the roads, which is, I think just in the heel of the exponential curve. I think it's about to go bonkers in the next 10 years.
I mean, I know you're often called the accidental businessman. I mean, there's a whole film to be made on these moments that, if somebody had told the 16-year-old Dale that this would be, in the life plan, you'd have probably said, get out of here, and then suddenly, you're in these moments where you're selling stuff. A lot of people would listen to that and go, right, you've sold something pretty big. Let's make no bones about it. You've made a few quid out of doing it. Let's buy a place in Mauritius, put my feet up for the next 500 years and do absolutely sod all. But that's not really in your plan, is it, to do?
No, it's not. No, we've got some good plans, actually. Selling it kind of frees us in terms of bandwidth, in terms of our headspace to do other things. And it does provide some cash as well. And I think probably perhaps the most exciting project will be our green gas mill, which I think we're going to chat about in a minute. There's a Twitter question.
Well, on that point, Christian emails and says, so you mentioned you'll be funding the gas mill project with money from the charging network sale. Is this just anaerobic digestion with a fancy name? Long-time supporter of your work, by the way, but would love to know how this differs. I think you better explain anaerobic digestion to most of us, Dale, if you could.
Yeah, this is where organic matter breaks down in the absence of air or oxygen in particular. And what we're planning is anaerobic digestion. I don't think it's a really fancy name. It's kind of in accordance with the naming of all of our other things, windmills and sunmills and that kind of stuff. But what's really different about it is the feedstock using grass rather than food waste or energy crops, which have got environment problems. And also there's a lot of energy in grass. It's a cleaner material to feed into an anaerobic digester than food waste, for example. So it's got a lot of advantages, and actually will create an enormous wildlife habitat as well if we turned over this marginal grassland to the production of gas. And decarbonizing heat, as it's described, is arguably the biggest challenge we have when it comes to getting to zero carbon, how we get, 20 odd million homes off of gas. And at the moment, the government are thinking we should do that with heat pumps, turn the gas load into electricity load, but that would create a ginormous demand for more electricity. And if instead we can make green gas, then that's a great answer.
Here's an incredible story out of Texas. This is a Republican congressman, Louis Gohmert, who's asked a senior US government official if changing the moon's orbit around the Earth or the Earth's orbit around the sun might be a solution for climate change. Now, I saw this and I thought, hang on, this guy might be a genius, and maybe there's stuff they can do that I didn't know about, and even if they could do it, it will, will it be effective? Either that, or he's absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm staggered by that. I had no idea that the moon was the cause of the climate crisis. Actually, the orbit of the moon, let alone the orbit of the Earth around the sun. I think it's in the bonkers category, that one. There was a story that I really liked in the news this week, and it's a microscopic worm-like creature that was found under the ice in Siberia. Been there for 24,000 years. And when they warmed it up, it was able to reproduce. And apparently it's a type of creature that's been around for 35 million years without having had sex, which sounds like the most miserable existence to me. That was my first thought. But they're all female and they kind of breed amongst themselves somehow. And what was really interesting to me about the story, though, was that as the permafrost melts, which it is, and we're not going to stop that, there will be forms of life under there that possibly we haven't seen before. This creature is existing around the world. It's not unique to Siberia, but there may be forms of creatures, viruses even, that we haven't seen before that are going to pop out because of the climate crisis. I found that a little bit interesting.
That is fascinating. I mean, you can't even begin to get your head around X amount of million years, can you? When you start to think, wow, stuff was around, live, and doing stuff and things.
35 million years. Not as old as sharks, of course. I think they're about 150.
Yeah.
Which is incredible.
That's true.
But not for much longer. If you've seen Seaspiracy, you'll note that the time on this earth may be limited.
A sad indictment of where we're at. Final one here from Alison on Twitter. Dale, will you stop landing your helicopter on Rodborough Common? It's scaring the animals. So much to say about this. I think the first one, I could even say on your behalf. You haven't got a helicopter.
Well, obviously, if I did, I'd go to that EV conference in it, wouldn't I? You know?
Indeed, yeah. You wouldn't
obviously,
be.
I mean, who would take a diesel car when you can take a helicopter?
Why do people think you've got a helicopter?
It's amusing. I don't know if Alice is being ironic or serious, but this is a rumor that has popped up, I don't know, every now and then for at least a decade. I first heard it probably a decade ago that I had a helicopter, that I'd landed it and scared somebody's horses. And actually, this is a detailed rumor, I'd given them a bag of carrots to make up for it. It's like, I don't know where any of that came from. But there you go.
Is there an electric one on the way there?
I think there will be, definitely. Yeah, definitely. We're making, of course, the electric hovercraft, which is coming on rather well. We've made some good progress on the drivetrain, and we're lining up to start building it, hopefully, in a few weeks' time.
Good work. We look forward to it. Dale, that's it for this one.
Nice one.
Have a cracking week. We'll speak in 7 days.
Cool. Looking forward to it. See you later, Ian.
Cheers, Dale. That's it for this episode. Don't forget, of course, you can follow this podcast from your podcast provider so that you get each new episode automatically. Do leave a review there too. If you want to get in touch, very simply email your comments, zerocarbonista@ecotricity.co.uk. Really important bit. Follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/DaleVince and facebook.com/DaleVince. And we'll see you in a week.
Zero carbon.
East of